Hillary Clinton hammering Trump today on his economic plans and also nailing him on his business record. Will this be another nail in a political coffin for Trump? Then Donald Trump's campaign, it's short on cash and even shorter on staff and organization. Will this be a big factor as we count down to the convention? And Attorney General Loretta Lynch visiting Orlando just a day after the Senate rejected 4 different gun control bills. What will it take for something to finally happen on guns in America? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am Richard French. Well, Hillary Clinton unloaded on Trump earlier today, slamming his business record, his economic plans, and a lot more. Here are the highlights or lowlights, depending on your perspective.
You might think that because he has spent his life as a businessman, he'd be better prepared to handle the economy. Well, it turns out he's dangerous there too. Just like he shouldn't have his finger on the button, he shouldn't have his hands on our economy. I don't say that because of typical political disagreements. Liberals and conservatives say Trump's ideas would be disastrous. The Chamber of Commerce and labor unions, Mitt Romney and Elizabeth Warren, economists on the right and the left and the center all agree Trump would throw us back into recession. One of the leading firms that analyzes the top threats to the global economy, called the Economist Intelligence Unit, comes out with a new list of threats every month. It includes things like terrorism and the disintegration of Europe. And this month, number 3 on the list is Donald Trump becoming President of the United States. He also wants to repeal the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the new consumer watchdog that Senator Warren helped create to protect families from unfair and deceptive business practices. That new agency has already secured billions of dollars in returns for people who have been ripped off. Donald Trump wants to get rid of it.
And for more on Trump and what we heard earlier today, we spoke to Rosalind Helderman. She is a political enterprise and investigation reporter for the Washington Post. Well, as we showed with some of those clips here, Hillary did not spare any criticism, certainly on both the economics of the Trump's plan and the business acumen and record of Trump. It really seemed to follow, in many ways, the script we saw in San Diego is related to the foreign policy potential of a Trump presidency. It seemed to work kind of almost like a roast type presentation using his own words.
Right. I think Clinton got a lot of praise and compliments after the San Diego speech. And one of the things that she was told at that time was that that technique where she doesn't really talk a lot about what Trump has said, but instead just sort of highlights some of the more bizarre and crazier things that he said and sort of just lets it hang out there, that had really worked for her in San Diego. So I think she's going to try that again.
I got 3 main takeaways from today, and I know that in your investigative reporting you talk about some of his other business dealings, but she wanted to say this guy's uninformed and he doesn't know the basic premise of how the general economy works, let alone how it works on a governmental level. 2, his record is terrible as a businessman if you look at it. And then finally, the last one is he'd be catastrophic for the economy. On that point, she brought up Moody's and what the consequences of the plans that he's already proposed would have on the broader economy. She also made another reference that we played the clip of. In short, she said millions, 3.5 million jobs, I think, would be lost here, and we'd be flirting with another recession just if he enacted what he proposed. Is the consensus on Wall Street that Trump's math doesn't even add up? It's not just a partisan attack, it seems to be bipartisan?
Well, I mean, that's one of the interesting things. Trump's plans tend to not be terribly coherent, so it's a little hard to know. He says that he'll, he's asked how will he bring jobs back from overseas, and he just says that he'll make better deals to do that. And, some of the things he's proposed suggest a possible trade war with foreign countries, which, yes, there is bipartisan agreement that that would actually be bad for the U.S. economy. It's interesting, of course, Donald Trump fired his campaign manager yesterday, and we saw out of the Trump campaign today something that felt a lot more like a normal campaign responding to Hillary Clinton's speech, which is to say rapid response, a series of emails that came from the Trump campaign throughout the time that she was speaking. And actually, the study that you just cited was one of the things that we received a direct and immediate response from the Trump campaign. And it was to say that the author of this study, economist Mark Zandi, who's a fairly well-respected economist, was to say that he's a Democrat and that it was actually a partisan attack against Trump's plans.
Another angle she took today was that, on the poll seemed to suggest that Trump, at least with the electorate on this issue of the economy, I think it's 51 to 43, they think that he'd be better on the economy or creating jobs. But she made a point to say that Trump says he's qualified to be president because of his business record. And he said, at one point, I'm going to do for this country what I did for my business. So let's take a look at what he's done. He's written a lot of books about business. They all seem to end at Chapter 11. We can expect, don't you think, Rosalind, to hear a lot more about that, not just Atlantic City, but a lot of other ventures that either he just slaps his name on it or they go bankrupt. And he's embraced the idea of dealing with debt and bankruptcy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is sort of a classic political strategy where you take what is supposed to be the strength of your opponent and try to turn it into their weakness. So if Donald Trump was known for anything before starting his presidential campaign, it was supposed to be as a successful businessman. But when you start looking at his business record, he has certainly made a lot of money for himself, but there is a certain amount of wreckage in his business past in which other people have lost out. And I think that is something we're going to hear a great deal from the Clinton campaign about. And yes, this taking on of debt, which is sort of symbolic for the U.S. government, with the government take on debt under Trump, is something we're going to hear a lot about, I think.
And also, Rosalind, where he called himself the king of debt, and basically the idea that we'll renegotiate what we have in the debit ledger. She said, you'd have Alexander Hamilton rolling over in his grave. We've never done that. We always make good on the debts that we owe, and under Trump that would be a negotiable point. Do you think Trump's going to stand by that, or do you think we're going to go to the election day where debt's a fungible thing? Whether or not we got to pay it, it's in the eye of the beholder.
I mean, with Trump, you never know. He's unpredictable day to day. But one of the few consistent themes in his campaign has always been sort of Trump as deal maker. Of course, the title of his first very successful book was The Art of the Deal. And so that is sort of one of his go-tos on almost any topic, including this topic of debt, what you would be getting if you elected him president is a good deal maker, and that he can renegotiate. He could renegotiate the Iran deal. He could renegotiate our trade agreements. And yes, that he would renegotiate the debts that are owed by our government.
So, Rosalind, I think we know the 30-second commercial. You can't let this guy have his finger on the nuclear button. And two, you can't let him have his hands in the economy. She said as much today. What I just think is striking is very few people in the financial arena are advocating what Trump is selling in terms of an economic recipe for recovery right now. I'm curious if that can change between now and the election, or if it would cause him to do a 180 for any of these guys, like the Koch brothers, for example, to say, this guy's got a message that we can get behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Trump will really attempt to do is go back to this core message that he can do it, that sort of the trust me, I am a businessman and I know how to do these things. Now, other businessmen have so far not been sold on that, or have not been entirely sold on that, but he did do well for a time, at least in the Republican primary election, of convincing ordinary Americans that it was time to give someone with his background a shot with the economy, and we'll have to see between now and November whether he can sort of get on track with that message again. Rosalind, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Now, Hillary attacking Trump's economic plans and just about everything else. Our panel will weigh in to discuss the campaigns and how they're going after one another. We'll be right back.